Hey, what's up guys, it's Marf and welcome back to another Asphalt Legends Unite video, and today we are talking all about Chicago. If you've been living under a rock, it's the most recent track to be added with the Festive Fury season update, and that also means the beginning of the next Drive Syndicate. Now, I think I'm going to cover that in a separate video, kind of like I always do with the Drive Syndicates every time they come around, so keep an eye out for that later down the road. I do want to get out of the way though that I don't think I've played every single variant just yet. So again, I think I'm definitely going to wait for the longer term, feelings about this track, as well as I want to watch the pros get their hands on it, and maybe there's a bunch of tips and tricks that we're just unaware of at the moment. So I'm keeping that in mind, and I hope you guys keep that in mind as well. So these are really just my first impressions of the track. And unfortunately, most of my first impressions are pretty negative, both in terms of the art style and sort of visual layout of the track, but also in terms of the gameplay itself. Just to get the sort of visual out of the way, because I know some people just don't care about it, they only care about gameplay. Personally, I'm the other way around. I think if a track looks very good, maybe it's super cinematic, even if it might be super simplistic, kind of like the tracks we've had in Asphalt 8, where they may not have much going on in terms of layout or in terms of shortcuts or anything like that, but they are just darn beautiful. I'm thinking of like French Guinea, for example, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, where you have the rocket ship going off. It may not be the most sophisticated track in the history of racing games, but it's so beautiful and cinematic that I personally just don't care. And unfortunately, Chicago doesn't hit that box at all. Now, again, I definitely have a little bit of bias as someone who's visited the Windy City many times, and I can sort of call it my second home at times. There is nothing about this track that personally reminds me of Chicago. Now, when I think of Chicago, I think of Millennium Park, I think of the lake, I think of Navy Pier, I think of these huge skyscrapers, and while we do have the skyscrapers, none of them really stand out as iconic. They all sort of start to blend into one another. I thought there was going to be a lot more verticality and sort of maybe going through buildings, or I guess scaling the buildings and getting a real feel for the sense of verticality and height, but because there isn't that huge of a verticality change throughout the map, I didn't really get that big of scale in terms of feeling. And also, if you notice throughout the gameplay, there is literally no color. I don't really know what's up with that, but a lot of the recent Asphalt tracks have had a bit of color to it, and I really enjoyed it. I think of Buenos Aires as having that sort of sunset golden hour look, and Norway was very green and blue and open with those beautiful skies and the open runways and everything like that, but this is just dull. There is no color anywhere throughout this track, which is really disappointing to me, because I think one of the strong points of Asphalt has always been its very bright, vibrant, saturated color palette, especially if you think about Asphalt 8, and unfortunately, I don't really see a whole lot of color in this track. Alright, so let's talk about the gameplay, because I know that can be some of the most important for many people, and unfortunately, this track falls flat as well, both literally and figuratively. If you notice throughout this video, I'm mostly using the Racer Tachyon Tartarus, which is the featured Drive Syndicate car. I do have a couple of multiplayer clips here. It is difficult to get Chicago because of course it's just a random pick, but of the few times I've played it in multiplayer, unfortunately I only got the chance to play with high top speed S-Class cars. And yeah, that sort of sums up. If you want to play with high top speed S-Class cars, this is not the track for you. I think the Racer makes it a little bit doable because you can get up to your top speed really quickly, but in terms of those normal S-Class cars, especially like the Fender Supersport that doesn't have the best handling, it's really hard to not only get up to your top speed, but also getting around corners is a pain in the butt. Firstly, there are too many corners that are super sharp. And secondly, if you try to go around those corners, you're gonna hit a wall. And if you try to wall ride, yeah, there's of course that chance you are gonna flip on your back. So I sort of had my hopes held up high because I thought there were glimpses of top speed focused areas from the gameplay we got from Gameloft, and there is a little bit of that when you go through that section in between the building where it sort of looked like there's two floors, but there really isn't. But unfortunately, that just isn't a huge amount of runway for a top speed car to go off of. Also, there's no nitro bottles or anything like that, and you're really discouraged at any of these ramps to take any 360s whatsoever, because more often than not, you're gonna face plant into a wall. The other thing I want to mention is rough terrain. Now, I figured because we're all driving on top of buildings, there wasn't going to be that annoying rough terrain that we see in many other parts of different tracks throughout the game. personally, I don't think rough terrain has any place in an Asphalt game. The point of an Asphalt game is to go fast. So when you have something that slows you down, in my opinion, that's just a detriment. I don't think it has anything to do with strategy or skill or anything like that. I think it's just a hindrance to gameplay and enjoyment. And for whatever reason, in between the shopping mall, I know it looks like it's grass, but why can't we call it just like turf or whatever fake grass and just get rid of the rough terrain, please? Because honestly, it is so frustrating. I was so confused why I was going so slow in my multiplayer games because I wasn't using a Vanda or a Huracan. I didn't have a lot of nitro, but I couldn't understand why I was slowing to a crawl. And then I figured it out. I'm on rough terrain. That shouldn't be anywhere on a track like this. Honestly, you already have such sharp corners and not a lot of opportunity to get up to top speed. I really don't like the fact that they've added rough terrain. Alright, so you can probably tell that my overall sentiment towards this track is very negative, and honestly, I don't like that. I don't like the fact that we have a new track, I've gotten excited about it, and I just have negative things to say. I will point out that, yeah, these jumps and verticality changes are interesting, and compared to a lot of the other tracks in Asphalt Legends Unite, I would say this has some of the most verticality, and I am enjoying that aspect. The problem is I'm just bumping into so many walls and I'm not getting a whole lot of nitro, and these top speed S-Class cars just don't feel at home on this track. I'm sure if I played with a Vanda or a Huracan, didn't do any 360s whatsoever, and just perfect nitroed my way through the whole track, it would feel very smooth and flow quite nicely actually. The problem is I don't feel like Asphalt should play like this, and I feel like that is definitely more a matter of opinion than objective statements. If you prefer gameplay with your Vanda on the Caribbean or Osaka, that's perfectly fine. However, I feel like Asphalt distinguishes itself from other racing games with huge jumps, massive open sprawls of high top speed gameplay, and that spectacle we got with Asphalt 8 with these huge set piece jumps going through rocket ships and other things like that. And this track doesn't really deliver many of those aspects that I've come to know and love for the Asphalt franchise. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I am really curious to hear your thoughts about Chicago in the comment section down below, and I will catch you all later.